Hello and welcome to Film Creed. We are going to be talking about the new films that are coming out, and mostly from a perspective of a cinematography and directing. And we're going to look at how they lit it up, how they used certain lights, and how you can possibly create those kind of images that mimic that era, that genre of filmmaking. Also, the approach that they have taken in terms of how the setup was done in terms of the layout of the lights and the decor and the costuming, and also partly in the acting that we're going to look at, and how this may possibly transfer into making better films on your behalf or anybody who's interested in it. So let's begin by who made this film. It's, as you know, interpretation from DC Comics, so we know that it's got a solid fan base, so that means it's going to get a lot of people watching it. Now, there have been a lot of critics talking about how good this film is versus how bad this film is and how bad the adaptation is. Personally, I think that the adaptation is very good in terms of the way that the story is being told. And I think that the interviews, if you watch it with Mr. Phoenix and the writers, you're going to find that they have a very solid understanding of how this film is supposed to relate to the rest of the stories. What you'll find here is that there is a adaptation that is very, very critical, because it creates the foundation for all the other episodes that will follow from here. And as you know, it's quite an investment for a film like of this venture to be made, and that means the success of this film will affect the way that the other films are being made, and those other films are going to also indicate how many films are going to be made in the next 5 years or so. If this is successful, we should be expecting a new Batman movie coming out in the next year or so, and that's going to, of course, bring revenues for the company. And it's also going to mean that these characters that appear in this film will probably appear in the following film, and that way it will join the stories together to create a more unified perspective on the story of Batman and Joker. Now, of course, what we need to look at is the point of how this character relates to the idea of how good and bad versus good versus evil is played out in Hollywood. As you may know, there is always this story of antagonist and hero, and what is happening in all of these stories is that there is a constant struggle, and there is never truly a victory that comes about because the villain has lost or has not succeeded in its goals. What we'll see is that the villain is overwhelmingly powerful or is well planned, and no matter how many plans that person may do, the villain will always fail. So in a classical genre of speaking, this falls directly in line with the hopes of 1930s and 40s, where people started to go into theaters to watch films, and what they wanted to do was to dream about how the world outside could be better, or how they could imagine their lives to be better by the hopes that the bad guys always lost. So over the years, of course, when we went into 60s, 70s, and further on, we saw those things change. But in here, we are seeing that it hasn't really changed in the way that the story is told. The story is the power of Joker's reborning renaissance that comes from the idea that a person can change and have a metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is a very critical word because it means an alteration on the character, and the character only evolves through the trial and tribulations. In a certain way, those people who will be watching these films and they're looking at this character, they might feel empathy for that. And that's another key point. You have to feel empathy for the villain or understand the villain's perspective to be able to tell a story in an effective manner. What you have found is you're going to see that Todd Phillips, who's one of the writers and director of this film, has worked in other films that are not of this genre but to tell a different story. For example, his works can be found on IMDb: The Hangover, The War Dogs, Due Date, and of course Starsky and Hutch. Those are all stories that are totally unrelated to this. But what makes this story interesting is the way that it's going to be portrayed. And the dialogue is the carrier of the story. If you notice, little bits of information that is given throughout the trailer tells you that this character is suffering, and suffering turns into a metamorphosis.
But I do. And people are starting to notice.
You think this is funny? Is this a joke to you?
And that needs to be told very well. And in that respect, when we look at on IMDb, so if you look at all those and you think about how he wrote these stories, you're going to find that he has got a pretty good solid foundation to make the story work. And in that respect, I think the character, the casting has worked very well. Mr. Phoenix, as you know, he's appeared in a lot of films, and his work has been ever evolving, and he portrays the character and is in the character very strongly. So we are seeing his body language, his mannerism, his manner of speech, that also metamorphoses throughout the film. That's creating the foundation of creating a great story. Also, what you're going to find is the cinematography. The cinematography on this is very, very important. What you're going to see that these individuals that appear in this film are portrayed in a certain light, and the light creates the appearance of how this character is going to relate to the other characters in the film. It is for that reason it's very, very important to watch carefully how the lighting changes from the beginning of the film towards the end, when the character of Joker becomes more and more pronounced and more prominent in the film, and holding the center stage of power, changing from a person who's crushed by society into a story of power. And that also relates to the current times. The adaptation of the story is very, very important, because Joker's story, as you know, dates back decades, but the story here is the adaptation. The adaptation is a current adaptation. It shows the challenges of a more modern society that does not allow weaker members of its society members to flourish or be having a room to exist. What you are going to see is this character, through his hardships, needs to exist in a new foundation. Otherwise, this character is going to either die or move. As Nietzsche once said, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And here is what we are going to find, that this character is going to change and become stronger. If you look at the technical aspects of creating this image, you're going to see a lot of the greener tones, the things that are very sublime, and these are the elements that creates a kind of a dreamy state. And that is mostly done through the lighting and the haze that exists in the cinematography of it. And also the choice of camera. We have Arri Alexa that is used, Alexa 65, which is with Hasselblad prime lenses. Then we have Arri Alexa that is mini and large format that is also used. It's going to basically reflect in the way the mood is done. As you may know, red cameras that are often used in films are more for action. This is more of a story, narrative storytelling, and you're going to find that it works very well with this theme of the story. Also, you're going to find that the film's budget is $55 million rather than $155 million or $20 million, because the company is making a relatively safe investment into a film that is going to do well. And of course, there is a lot of work that has gone into it. Mark Bridges is the person who was doing the costume design. If you may remember his works, he did Inherent Vice, Phantom Thread, and Artist. These are works that he did in the later part of the 2017-2016. It goes to 50 Shades of Grey as well. Inherent Vice was 2014. So the lighting structure, the costumes, and everything else, they integrate very well as a storytelling perspective. What you're also going to see is the choice of the costumes in relationship to the overall scene. The costumes make the images stand out. It makes the character stand out. And you're going to also see the Joker character, as it evolves, the costumes change. They become more vibrant, more colorful. It creates a relationship to the changing of the mood of the story. It starts slow, and as it develops and develops and the character gets stronger, it gets a faster and faster pace. It's creating that crescendo, which is very beautifully done. So it is that part that also needs to be looked at. So it's a combination of lighting. You got the cameras that complement the story. You got beautiful costumes that help to convey the character in more full perspective. And also you're going to see this sublime muted light that is giving this general illumination, and you're going to see like the window lights coming in, but it's casting a nice little beam of light interiorly. You're going to have this haze over the lights that are overhead that creates this special mood. It is all there to tell the story. Also, you're going to see the movement of the camera. Camera is often very stationary, in a very classical Hollywood style, over the shoulders, going back and forth. It does not need to be very complicated at first, but it does tell you something about the way that the film is being approached. It is observation of the character. The movement of the camera being more stationary creates a focus on the character rather than distracting the viewer's attention from the subject, because often when the camera moves, we are always trying to understand what is happening as the camera moves. But this being, especially in terms of the close-ups, you're going to see that the character is in full view. There is nothing else but the character to look at. If you watch the trailer, or if you have looked at the trailer, you're going to find that the trailer also complies with the story that we have seen, and which is the story is of a character in a place that is urban, and this character is loner. This character is told through the light of someone who's close proximity. Of course, what you're going to find is, for example, the bus is green. His clothings are in the muted brownish, greenish tones. He walks home. The lights are green and bluish tone. He walks into corridors. The camera follows, and as it follows, you're going to see his environment and the close-ups. His eyes, the manner of his speech, is all there. And also, as we move through the story, we're going to see the camera angles change. For example, when he's talking, it is from the perspective of somebody who doesn't command strength, but later on the camera angles change and you're seeing it through a window that allows you to see the evolution of a character that is becoming more and more powerful. Of course, there are things that we will have to look in more depth as we look at the story from a perspective of musical score. Musical score also helps the story. It is an underlying theme that keeps building and building and building, and that is going to help the story in terms of effect.
It's so awful, isn't it?
For my whole life,
Of course, you're
I
going to
didn't know
see
if I
another
even
important
really
thing,
existed.
and that is the emotional connection of Joker's character in relationship to a female character. And this, that there is a love affair, there is the admiration, there is the love. And what's happening is the story becomes interesting because this time we are not confronted by an isolated individual, but an individual who is intimate with another character through the evolution. If he had not changed, if he had not become more powerful, he would have never gone and kissed the person that he was in love with. And that creates the strength. Can it be done through the medium of a lens? And the lens conveys the story because as the person moves, you're going to see the action getting better and better. There is intention. Tension is created through the action and through the camera work that follows Joker as he goes about becoming more powerful. And that is very, very strong. And I think that having this film in its proper perspective with the 70 millimeter that is used is going to give that overall effect of being a story that combines and joins the other stories that are in the lineup of Batman and for future ones that are going to come. And overall, I think it's a very well done film. If you have comments and questions, please drop a line and we'll discuss. Also, we're going to discuss the choice of lenses in our upcoming videos, and we'll discuss about how the cinematography has been used in more than just scene by scene, but also from a general perspective of the film. And I hope you continue to subscribe and become a member of our community, and we'll see you in our next review. Thank you.